Chapter 3. Gods and Goddesses. Xion's head was spinning and his heart was still broken as he made his way to the north to find the desert wolves. What did he hope to achieve? Some sort of revenge? A bargain for peace? The wolves worshipped the goddess of power, and if there were answers to be found about how to use his new sword, Xion knew they would be found there. Though he grieved the loss of his mother and his love, he had a request to carry out. He realized now why his mother had sent him after the sword. She saw in Bonnie's eyes what he could not, and then she died protecting it, his son and his future. Above all, he had to create a life for his son as Bonnie would have wanted, and so now he was walking into a den of wolves to seek their counsel, and no matter the outcome, he had to honor his mother's sacrifice and do right by his son. The scent of wolves and coyotes danced on the winds as Xion reached the northern edge of the desert. He came to the largest village he had ever seen, built around the base of a giant statue of a woman that he guessed must have been Sententia, with large stairs on either side leading to a temple carved into the cliffside behind her. The wolves were keepers of the old religion, the belief that the world and everyone in it was created by the three mothers. Sententia, the goddess that wields the power of creation. Sophia, the goddess who possesses the knowledge of all creation. And Trua, the goddess with the compassion for all of creation. Most clans kept faith in at least one of them, if not all three, and every clan believed in one variation of the creation myth or another. Could it really be considered a myth now? Xion thought to himself as he made his way through the village toward the statue, making sure to keep his hood up and his tail and sword hidden. As he got closer, Xion began to study the sword held aloft in the statue's right hand. A giant replica of the sword that had now found its way to his hip. Xion stopped and looked up, his eyes transfixed on the sword, when the crowd around him began stumbling backwards and away from him with panicked expressions. The she-devil. The crowd began to bark and howl. A passerby had noticed the blue mark on Xion's forehead and started the panic. Many of the pups and elderly began to flee, but the able-bodied hunters circled him now, and Xion found himself in a sea of daggers, swords, fangs, and claws. He shifted his eyes through the crowd with his sword drawn, trying to decide which wolf would come at him first. But no one in the crowd dared make the first move. Then a group of wolves came rushing down the temple stairs, led by a small gray wolf. The sea of teeth parted and the small wolf walked into the center toward Xion, looking him up and down with one deep blue eye and one yellow. "I have come seeking the counsel of your elders." Xion barked as the villagers snarled and growled at him. "Leave here, you monster!" One of the crowd demanded. "Kill him." Another member of the crowd barked. "Quiet." A deep bark came from the small wolf, a bark much bigger than the wolf himself, and the pack obliged, stopping cold and standing silent as the statue behind them. "Did you not hear him? He came seeking the counsel of our elders." The wolf barked as the crowd parted around him and he advanced on Xion. "Xion, he is the son of the she-devil," one of the wolves said as he approached. "Aye," the gray wolf replied with a nod. "And look at the sword he's wielding. It looks familiar, does it not?" Xion replied to the wolf, not taking his eyes off the slender, glistening, silver sword in Xion's hand. "If that sword is really what it looks like and he meant us harm, we would all be dead by now." Xion paused for a moment to consider his position. "Your name, Fox?" he barked in response to Xion's stern gaze. "Xion," he replied, maintaining the grip on his hilt. "Well, Xion the Fox, you have a lot of nerve walking into a den of wolves, wielding what appears to be the sword of our goddess, and then requesting an audience with our elders." Xion changed from a wolf to a man and put a hand on Xion's shoulder before leaning forward and continuing in his ear. "Xion, we cannot afford to lose any more hunters. I will take you to the elders, but I beg you, knowing the power you hold regardless of the sword's authenticity, if they cannot help you, please leave this place in peace." Xion looked at the frightened children in the crowd before turning his gaze back to Xion and giving a nod of agreement. Xion, we cannot take him to our elders. Only wolves are allowed on those hallowed grounds. A large grey wolf barked as the crowd followed Xion and Xion up the stairs to the grand temple. Xion whirled around baring his fangs. "Who is your alpha?" he growled. "You are." The wolf stammered, taking a step back. "And was that a birthright, or was it earned?" Xion growled back. "It was earned through the blood of the previous alpha." "That is right. So unless you mean to challenge me, and then challenge him, know your place," he finished as he nodded toward Xion. The large wolf's ears flattened and he slowed his pace to create distance between Xion and himself. Xion was not a full-blooded wolf. He was a mutt, so Xion could only guess what he must have done to become the alpha of the clan. This was not fear or hatred but respect that Xion saw in Xion's eyes. One alpha to another. They entered the temple together, leaving the crowd behind as the large stone doors closed behind them. "My elders, I bring this fox before you. He appears to possess Sententia's sword, and he seeks your wisdom." Before them, in a smoke-filled room, sat a circle of old wolves with their eyes on Xion. "He is the son of the she-devil?" a female member asked as she blew a smoke ring into the air. "Yes," Xion replied, "and he claims to be sent by our goddess Sententia." An old brown wolf asked from the left. "No," Xion replied, now stepping in front of Xion. "You dare speak to us directly?" The head of the council balked. "If you were not sent by Sententia, then how is it that you claim to bear her sword? What makes you so bold?" "I pulled this sword from the depths of the nether," Xion replied, purposely leaving out the part about freeing Agatha. The council seemed shocked by his statement. They began to whisper among themselves before falling silent again. "Prove to us what you say is true," the leader of the council commanded. "That is why I have come to you. Though I possess the sword, I do not know how to use its power. You wield the greatest weapon in all of creation, and you don't know how to use it. And you have walked into a den of your enemies and admitted this openly. Surely you jest. Must we be enemies?" Xion replied. "Are we both not clans of fur? We fight for what? Territory, food. How vast is this desert? How vast is this world? And we squabble over barren sand. What has that done for us? Both of our clans are in shambles, barely able to call themselves clans or defend anything of consequence. In no small part thanks to your mother." One of the elders barked angrily. There was a heavy silence as the elders sat mulling over Xion's words. The female wolf took another drag and puffed her smoke before she scoffed. "It is said that Sententia once used that sword to control the very sands of time and raise life from it. Can you not even control the sand beneath your feet?" Xion was not sure what to do, so he reached for his blade only to have Xion grab his wrist. "Not he," he growled as Xion's eyes met his. "Never draw your weapon in the temple." Xion nodded and turned to walk away from the elders. Once outside the temple, he drew the sword, and the crowd of wolves below grew uneasy. Even Xion stood at the ready. Xion swirled his sword in the air, and nothing happened. He turned the sword in his hand, thrust his blade to the ground, and the sand around him began to pulse. Xion was overwhelmed. At first he could hear, see, and feel so much it was like being everywhere at once. He tried to move his hand to let go of the sword, only to realize it was not there. His entire body was missing. It was as if he existed as a consciousness and nothing more. He heard a familiar voice and tried hard to remember where he had heard it before. As it came to him, he could see the voice's owner. It was Bonnie's twin sister, Connie. Connie stood in her burrow near the desert's eastern border, sorting through her tattered wardrobe, thinking of what she might wear tomorrow, when the sand in her room began to spin and shift. Then it came together, and she could make out the face of a man she thought to be long dead. "You!" she screamed as Xion materialized from the sand. "Connie, wait!" Xion exclaimed as Connie made a run for something to strike him with. "You killed my sister!" Connie screamed as she hit Xion across the back. "Connie, please!" Xion pleaded. He wanted to talk to her more than he wanted to talk to anyone in the world. She was Bonnie's twin, and looking at her was like looking at a ghost. She made a deal with the serpents to have your demon child. She was going to give us all up. This drought is all your fault. You two angered the gods and they have cursed us all. I loved her. Xion screamed as he grabbed Connie by the shoulders, pressing her into the wall. As he looked into her eyes, tears came to his. Connie's entire body froze as Xion began to sob. I loved her more than I have ever loved anyone in this world, and she was taken from me just as she was taken from you. Connie looked up at Xion, her heart beating fast, fearing that she would soon join her sister. You think I knew? You think I knew what she had done? I would have stopped her. Nothing in this life was worth losing her. Xion eased his grip on Connie's shoulders and went to sit on her bed, tears pouring down his face. And now I have a son that has her fur. A son that I don't know. And every time I look at him I see her. Connie began to relax now. She could not believe that she had feared Xion. His were the tears of a broken man, and as she watched him her heart began to break for him. It was like losing her sister all over again, and she began to cry too as she went to comfort him. You were all she talked about, you know. Even when we were little. Connie paused and smiled to herself. Xion, her imaginary fox friend. None of us could have ever guessed you were real. A fox that did not eat rabbits. She wanted to be with you so deeply, and she really hoped our father would understand. She paused and began to sob harder. Our father is dead now. Jack and I are the only ones left. The drought and the raids, they were awful. So many of my people were killed. No more. Xion replied through his tears as Connie looked up at him. What do you mean, Connie? What if we could unite all the people of the desert and put an end to the bloodshed that tears our home asunder and makes this desert such a wretched place to live? I want to protect the dream that your sister gave her life for. I want to bring together predator and prey. Those are pretty words, Xion. And my sister had grand dreams for sure. But they are just that, Xion. Nothing but pretty dreams. Connie, this sword is the sword of a goddess. I touched it to the ground and I became the desert sand. With it I can bring together the clans of the desert, make them understand how much more we could do if we came together. You want to be a king? Connie asked. No. Xion replied. We need a council of sorts. One set up in a way that all people of the desert have a voice. Will you be my liaison to the rabbit clan? My brother Jack would be better suited for it. Politics has never been my forte. When he is ready to hear me out, tell him to find a place we can speak freely and call my name. I will come. Where are you going? Connie asked as Xion stood and turned from her, back to the den of wolves. He replied as he drew his sword and thrust it to the ground. Connie watched as he changed to a figure of sand and fell to the floor of the room. Xion could hear all the voices again. He could see all the people, and feel the sun beating down on the desert. Now I just have to focus on Xion. Xion thought to himself. He could see him still there on the temple steps. We will not be swayed by simple prey magic. One of the elders growled. Xion, it was foolish not to kill him when we had the chance. Another elder added as the wolves sniffed the air for any trace of Xion. Xion could hear them now and he tried hard to imagine himself there. A column of sand rose up from the desert floor. The sand began to take form and a giant version of Xion materialized and drew a sword of sand crossing blades with the statue of Sententia. Is that proof enough? Xion balked to the council, who stood in awe of him as he walked out from within the sand figure. It began to collapse, causing the crowd below to flee as sand filled the air. The elders began to snarl and challenge Xion with accusations of blasphemy, but Xion spoke up first. That was proof enough for me, he said as he turned to Xion and gave a low bow. Xion. One of the elders balked in protest. Elders, I as your Alpha recognize this man to be the wielder of the Sword of Sententia, and as such he is to be recognized as our new Alpha if that is his will. A fox becoming Alpha of our clan. This is an outrage. One of the elders barked. Xion growled back and nodded to the crowd at the bottom of the giant stairs. A crowd of wolves stood wide-eyed. It had been enough for them as well, and one by one they began to kneel. It doesn't look like either of us will be given a say in the matter, Xion said as the council stepped forward to look at the crowd below. Hail Xion, leader of the desert wolves. The council's leader said reluctantly. Hail Xion. The council echoed.